in this respect. I'm going to talk about helping families and kids to flourish in an anxious world. So I'd like for you to turn to Deuteronomy chapter 6. And as I kick off the series, I just want you to know, I really believe it's going to help all of us. So whether you're a parent or not a parent, grandparent, your aunt, uncle, cousin, nephew, whatever, I think it'll speak to you. But I want to talk today to parents and about parents, because many of you are a parent, you have a parent, or you had a parent. Anybody exempt from that group? So I think it'll speak to all of us. The fact is that parents have a huge influence on the life of their children. You know, even an absent parent has an impact on the life of a child. Or if you lost a parent as a child at a young age, that really had a big impact on you. You know, good parenting and bad parenting both have impacts on children. And so statistics tell us that parents really probably have the number one influence on a child's life. I mean, next to smartphones and peers, and it can go either way depending on age, and I'll get to that later on in the series, parents have the greatest influence on the life of a child. So here's the other thing about parents, besides the fact that you have the greatest influence on children, is this: that parents often sometimes have no idea of what they're doing. If you're a parent, you'd probably say, yeah, that's true. If you're a friend of a parent, you've looked at your friend and said, yeah, they don't have an idea either. And your kids, every once in a while, look at you and said, yeah, they have no idea of what they're doing. But the fact is that everybody has a child in their life that they care about. Everybody. You have a niece, you have a nephew, you have a child, you have a grandchild. Listen, you have a stepson, a stepdaughter. You've got somebody in your life that's a child that you care about. And you care about them so that every once in a while it just weighs on you. It says, how are they going to turn out? Are they going to be okay? What's going to happen to them? But the truth is that whether you believe it or not, our kids are not okay. Now, just listen to me for a moment. Because there are a number of books that are telling us that. And one of them is titled, I don't know if we have we're up here, yeah. We're just not in the back screen. But there are a number of books telling us that. One is titled Anxious Generation. And it's by Jonathan Haidt, which is all about how smartphones are actually literally rewiring the brains of our kids. So if you want to know about what something's going on between kids and parents today, it's definitely worth a read. It's not a Christian book, but I'll tell you what, he's got some incredible insights. The other one is called Generations, and it's by Jean Twenge, and it outlines the differences between generations. So the difference between, boomers and millennials and Gen Xers and Gen Zs, and what they all mean for the future of us as Americans. But I'm going to show you something that we all really know instinctively, but what happened was, and what we know instinctively is this, that we live in a more anxious generation than we've ever lived in, this generation. So the National Institute of Health did a survey, and the survey basically asked this question: how many of you would describe yourself as being more anxious than you've been in the past? And behind me is the graph that would show, they did the study from 2008 to 2020, so it's actually pre-pandemic. And so this is what the graph shows. Basically it shows, first of all, if you're a boomer, if you're 50 and older, you fared pretty well. We were pretty chill. We only went down, increased by 8%. Okay, that's it. However, the next generation, which is that generation, the Gen Xers, ages 35 to 49, their anxiety increased 52%. When the millennials were asked, 24 to 30, 26 to 34, that age, anxiety increased 103%. And for Gen Zs, the ones who are 18 to 25, we haven't even looked at the others, their anxiety increased 139%. Wow. Now, I want you to look, because right here, this point right here between 2012 and 2014, that's when things really began to spike. And there's a reason why that spiked. And the reason is this, that at that point, that is when we were introduced to smartphones. They became more available, and when you got that, oh, I can't believe it, we have unlimited data. Oh yeah, you had unlimited data. Data to what? And so there has been a correlation between smartphones and anxiety because of the way that it has affected us. And it's changed the lives of generations. So studies are showing screens have changed us. So Twain shares about this in her book, Generations, that every generation has things that change them. And what changes them are two dynamics. One is an event that happens, a major event, and the other is a technological advance. So we know what happened for Gen Xers. For them, the major event that took place was 9/11. That shaped their life. We didn't really know what terrorism was before then. And what was the technological advance? That was when the internet became much more available. But more recently, Gen Zs, you know what the event in their life has been? What was the major event that happened? It was the pandemic. Their life has been shaped by the pandemic. But what was the technological advance? Smartphones. Because at their fingertips is this portal that exposes them to everything. They have the world in their pocket. And so it changed the way that we have relationships. Listen, the smartphones changed the way that we do life. So if we're honest as adults, not only are our kids not okay, as adults, we're not okay. Because we've been shaped by that. In other words, so, hey, listen, maybe you're a boomer and you haven't had the anxiety, but I'll tell you what, we've taken it on because we see our kids and how anxious they are and how depressed they are. We're anxious. We're depressed over their depression and their anxiety. We're tied up in it. Listen, it's absolutely incredible. And maybe Pastor Nick has shared this with you, our youth director. He said this. He said, I have had kids struggle, 7th graders, 6th graders, 5th graders, with anxiety. Let me ask you a question. I don't know. I didn't even know what anxiety was as a kid. What is that? Nobody ever talked about that. But now it's like in their face all the time struggling with it. So as adults, we're not okay either. So here's what I want to talk about. How do we, as parents and kids, flourish in an anxious world? Now listen, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a pastor. So that means that what I'm going to do, when I look at the challenge, I look at it from a spiritual perspective. And one of the questions I ask is this: what if the problem that we have with anxiety is really spiritual? And what if the solution to that is spiritual? And what if the solution to that is looking back to some of the ancient practices, the wisdom that has been passed down through the ages? What if that's the answer to our anxiety? So it's really, really interesting. So Jonathan Haidt, in his book, Anxious Generation, this is what he writes. And what's really interesting about this, he is an avowed atheist. He makes no bones about it. He's public about that. And yet he devotes one chapter in his book to the value of spirituality. And he says this. He says that the importance of spirituality and spiritual practice to the erosion that's creating anxiety in our life. And again, this is what he says. He's an atheist. And what he does a takeoff on Blaise Pascal, who said this. He says, there is a God-shaped hole in every human heart. That's what Pascal said. Of course, Pascal went on to say that hole can only ever be filled, not by something created, but by God himself. But he goes on to say this. Haidt says, or at least many people feel a yearning for meaning, for connection, and for spiritual elevation. And then he goes on to say, a phone-based life, which is how we describe our lives now. How many of you at the table have dinner, and this is what it is? Everybody's looking at their phone. They're even texting people across the table. Like, wait a minute, yeah, you can't talk? No, I'm texting you. He says this, a phone-based life often fills that hole with trivial and degrading content. The ancients, in other words, the wisdom from the past, advise us to be more deliberate in choosing what we expose ourselves to. So the ancients, when you look back, you find, what did they do? What was the wisdom? How did they do life? They encourage us to be way more intentional about what we look at, about what we allow into our lives. So when it comes to directing kids to a life that's flourishing in this time of anxiety, we have to ask ourselves, what are we parenting to? In other words, what's the goal? Have you ever found that sometimes you can get so caught up in parenting that you forget, what am I parenting to? What's the goal? And so a part of it, the incredible solution is ancient and it's spiritual. And you know what we have? We have the scriptures, which are ancient, but they are real and they are relevant to us today. So I'm going to walk you through a passage of scripture, maybe for some of you familiar, Deuteronomy chapter 6, so that's where we're headed, about the wisdom in parenting so that your kids will flourish in an anxious world that we live in. And I'm going to give you some super practical application, and I'm going to send you home with a giveaway. So here we go. Deuteronomy chapter 6. Are you ready? Backstory. You can pull it up on your smartphone. Oops. Okay, rewire your brain here. Pull it up on your smartphone. Or pull it up on your text. Yes, I'm going to have it behind me, but take a look at it in black and white. Deuteronomy chapter 6, backstory. This was written 1,500 years before Jesus. And the people of God, Israel, God's chosen people, were slaves in Egypt for 400 years. They cried out to God, and he picked a man named Moses who led them out of Egypt. But once they got out of Egypt, they found themselves wandering in a wilderness, in a desert for 40 years. They're waiting to enter into this region that was called the Promised Land. So Moses says, listen, good news, you guys are going to be able to shake all of the sand out of your sleeping bags. And you are going into the Promised Land. And you're going to be able to settle. But before they settled, God says, I need to define the relationship here. And he gives them a bunch of guidelines. And he gives them a bunch of commandments. You want to flourish? This is the way you live your life. You want to prosper? Do this. So he gives them that. But before he does that, he goes ahead and he says, I want you, Moses, speak to the people about their kids. Speak to the people about their family. And this is what he says. Ready? Chapter 6, verse 3. Listen closely, Israel. Hebrew word for that is this. Shema. Hear. Listen closely, Israel, and be careful to obey. Then all will go well with you, and you'll have many children in the land flowing with milk and honey. Okay. You're going to be in the land flowing with milk and honey? By the way, metaphor, just to let you know. So it wasn't like, oh, look at that. We're in the Promised Land. There's milk, a river of milk. No. It just meant there was going to be abundance. There was going to be prosperity there. And he says this. Just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. So what's he saying? First of all, when you move into the Promised Land, listen, you're going to have many generations of kids there. So he says, listen closely. Now listen, here's what he follows with. He doesn't say, listen closely as parents. Listen closely as kids. Listen closely as grandparents. Listen closely as teachers. He doesn't say that at all. What he says is this. He says, listen closely, Israel. And if you hear the Shema sung, because if you attend a temple service anywhere throughout the world during that temple service, the rabbi is going to sing, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel. Hear, everybody. This is for all of you. Meaning what? Meaning that kids are community responsibility. Spiritual walking requires a wide circle because we're walking with kids. So as Moses was standing here, he would say, listen, the kids are represented in Church on the Sound. They're our responsibility. It's not just you and yours. They're ours. And we together walk as a body. We together walk as a community. We're all responsible for them. We need to walk alongside them. Now listen, for me, one of the great benefits of having actually started the church and had our girl after 13 years finally come is because you have impacted our daughter. Our daughter is here today because of what you as a congregation have blessed her. She has an Aunt Katie and an Uncle Joe. And Joe Firmino so missed that brother. But that's her family. And Miss Marianne and Kevin and Cheryl Hukin poured into her life as a teenager. She benefited because this was her family. This was her congregation. This was the group of people that were concerned about her. So Moses is saying, this is all of our responsibility, not just parents. Then he says, listen, the Lord our God, the Lord alone. Or if you have, most of you in your Bible say, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Echad, one. And so the Lord is one. Now what's he saying? Why would that be important? The Lord is one. Because listen, the nations around them, they didn't have one God. They had many gods. They had multiple idols. You had this God, this God, this God, this God. It looked like this, looked like this. He says, no, the Lord is one. So he's saying, as you go into the promised land, don't forget who God is. You're that God-shaped hole that all of us have. Don't try filling it with something else or someone else. Remember, I'm the Lord. Don't fill it with anyone else. Then he says, listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord alone. And you think what he's going to say is, now, kids, here's what I want you to do. Parents, here's what I want you to do. You got to tell your kids this. You got to tell. No, he doesn't say that. This is what he says. You must love the Lord with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your strength, and you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. So he's saying, listen, before you get to those things you're going to teach your kids, before any of that, what I want you to do is this. He says, before you tell them, you know all the stuff we tell our kids? What do you tell them? Clean your room. I don't know. Make sure, please, don't take your stuff and put it on the counter when you come home from school. Please, don't leave the garbage by the door. Please don't do that. Before you tell them anything, here's what you're going to tell them. You're going to tell them, don't forget God. So the question is, where are you when it comes to your relationship with God? Because what he's really saying is, I can't be in them if it's not in you. In other words, you can't lead kids to places you haven't been. So what does that mean for you and me to follow God wholeheartedly, be committed to God? It means walking with your kids spiritually requires that you make faith personal first in your own life. So here's the question. How close are you to God right now? You say, well, Nicholas, I want my kids to have a faith. I don't want them to fill that empty hole in their life with things that are going to be really destructive in their life. I want them to know that, listen, there's something so much more than just the material world. There is a world that's unseen, that's real, and that's powerful, not just the material world. Nicholas, I want them to grow with a moral compass. I want them to have character. I want them to grow up with values that are going to be good values. The only way that you're going to be able to walk alongside them is if you take the journey first. See, I don't know about how all that stuff. Listen, if you're here, we want to come alongside you. And if you're starting the journey, we want to come alongside you so that we can journey with you and to take you along and to help you with that. But some of you here, you've been saying, well, listen, Nicholas, I'm on the journey. I've been on the journey for years, for a long time. My question would be this. How close are you to Jesus right now? You can't take your kids where you haven't been. As close as you like your kids to be, as close as you like your grandparents to be, grandkids to be, when your kids look at your life and your grandkids look at your life, or aunt and uncle look at your life, are they able to say, you know, there's something that they have in their relationship with God. I want some of that. I got to figure that out. What is that? Now, I shared our story with you Joy and I were blessed by parents. We were blessed by grandparents that are really good at this. I mean, I still remember Joy's mom, Joyce. We'd go to New Jersey and visit, and I'd go out for a run, and I'd come back, and there she would be. There always, always, always. There she would be on her chair with her Bible, reading and praying. That's my memory of Joyce. Always. And my dad, same thing. I'd find him downstairs early. I'm up like 5:30. He's already down there. He's got his Bible open. He's got his coffee, and he's reading. That was it. And when my Nonna moved into our house in high school, here she was. She had her own room. My parents built a room in the house, and there she was. She was singing. I could hear her. She was singing. She was praying for hours. That was the legacy that was left to us. I knew, Nonna, how do you do that? What's that all about? And listen, I say those things, I'm not saying to brag. I'm not saying to one-up anybody. I'm just trying to say, listen, I want to do it to challenge you. I want to do it to inspire you, because you can begin right here, right now, where you are, to do that. Love the Lord. Commit yourself to his ways. And when it says that you're wholeheartedly trying to follow God, have a relationship with him, he says this, the things he's telling you, the things that he's commanding you, listen to this. You got to follow this. It says, repeat them. So the things that you've gotten, you repeat them time and again to your children. Talk about it when you're at home, when you're on the road, when you're going to bed, when you get up. He says, tie them on your hands and wear them on your foreheads as a reminder. Some of you are like, okay, that's weird. What do I do? Like put a Post-it on my head? There it is. That'll remind me. Well, I'll talk about that later in the series, but just to say, he says, even put it on your door frames. What am I putting in my door frames? What he's talking about there, by the way, have you ever been to a Jewish home? They have a mezuzah. Mezuzah, just a piece. It's a very thin piece. You put it on the doorpost. We have one right here at the church. We have one at our home. It's a reminder. What's it remind you of? What's in the mezuzah? In the mezuzah is a little scroll, and it has this verse, Shema Israel. Listen closely. Be reminded of the commands, because I want you to flourish. I want you to have abundance. I'm leading you into a promised land. That's my heart for you. But you're going to follow. Be reminded. Don't forget God. So what's that mean? Basically he's saying this. You have to have spiritual conversations that are just normal with kids. Normal spiritual conversations. So spiritually walking requires a rhythm. A spiritual rhythm. So like what your grandkids said, now what's that mean? It just means you do it in the normal course of life. You don't put it on, you don't put on an act. So when the grandkids come over the house, you say, you don't get out your pulpit and say, okay, it's time to have a Bible lesson right now. Kids, sit down. No, you don't do that. It's just normally, you talk about God in the normal conversation of your life. So the grandkids come over, hey, listen, how was Sunday school this week? What did they teach? What did you learn? Oh, we learned about Moses, or we learned about Joshua. That's great. Or you talk about, listen, when you pray, like, do you ever hear like God speaking to you when you pray? Because prayer is just conversation, isn't that it? Or maybe you tell them. You say, I was praying the other day, and here's what happened. God showed up in this. You see, it's a normal conversation. Because if you don't do that, you don't make it a normal part of your conversation. We're so good at having conversations. Like we talk about the Mets, we talk about sports, we talk about this, we talk about that, we talk about how your grades are, we talk all that stuff, but interjecting, how is your relationship with Jesus? And you share that, because if you don't do that, and it's not part of your life at all, and then all of a sudden, you do this, they're being like, that is so fake. Because that's not you. It's got to be you. It's in you. It's part of you. That's what he's saying. And so, you say, Nicholas, I'll tell you what, that sounds like really awkward. You're trying to say to me, I need to have a spiritual conversation with my kid. Yes, that's awkward. I know it's awkward. I know that. But you should do it anyways. Why? Because the awkward things are often the most powerful things in our life. Nobody says this, wow, I had such a breakthrough in my comfort zone. Wow. It was so, that normal conversation went, wow. No, it wasn't that. I've said this a million times here, and I'm so thoroughly convinced of this. You ready? There is no connection apart from risk-taking. You want to connect? Risk. Take a risk. And so take a risk spiritually with your kids. Share with them. But it has to be in you. If it's not in you, they're going to see it. Then he says this, the Lord your God will soon bring you into the land that he swore to you. Now listen, follow along. The promised land is going to be unbelievable. He says, when he made a vow to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, it's a land with large, prosperous cities that you did not build. The houses will be richly stocked with goods you didn't produce. In other words, I'm going to take you, this land, taking it from your enemies, going to give it to you. He says, verse 11, you will draw water from cisterns you didn't dig. You will eat from vineyards and olive trees that you didn't plant. Okay, can you imagine? You're living in a tent for 40 years, and now you're going to be getting this. He says, when you have eaten your fill in the land, be careful not to forget the Lord who rescued you from slavery in the land of Egypt. When you finally get what you want, when you're finally in the land of milk and honey, don't forget God. I'll tell you what, you and I, we live in one of the most affluent societies in the world. And yet, sometimes we feel that as affluent as it is, we always feel like, you know what, it is so expensive. I don't know how am I ever going to find a house. I don't know how am I going to be able to afford the apartment. How am I going to pay the rent? How am I going to buy a car? How am I going to insure the car? I just can't do this. It's so expensive. Even though it is, we still live in the most affluent society in the world. And guess what? I think we probably live in the most affluent time in the history of the world. We have more resources than we've ever had just as countries. And could it be, though, because with all of this prosperity, with all of this affluence, we have great anxiety. Why? Could it be that what we've done, we've gotten all the stuff, but we've forgotten God? Because he said, when you come into the land, don't forget the Lord your God who brought you there. And what we've done is we take that God-shaped hole and we try to fill it with stuff, and we fill it with everything. We fill it with a new house. We fill it with a new car. We fill it with a new kitchen. All these wonderful things, you know. And we fill it with a boat, and we fill it with all these things. And we enjoy it for a time. And it's like great, isn't this wonderful? And you bring your friends over to your house and say, oh, they go, no. When did you get that living room set? That's unbelievable. Oh, it's beautiful. It matches all the furniture in your house. I sat down so comfortable. Where did you get that? Well, I got it here. Well, congratulations. And you're like way up here until Johnny decides to use it for an artwork. And there it is. Why'd you do that? Now what do? It doesn't have the same effect. You put a doily over it. That's what we used to call it. Remember doilies? A doily over it. And guess what happens to that couch set about 20 years from now? Where is it? Thrown away. It's in the garbage, right? What do you do with that hole? God has created us as spiritual beings. He created us to be in a relationship with him. And we start stuffing that hole with other things. We forget God. It leads us to the anxious place. And whether we realize it or not. So what Moses is doing, he's begging the people of Israel. He's begging them after 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. You're going to get the promised land. You're going to get it. But when you do, don't forget God. Hear, O Israel, pay attention. So what am I paying attention to? I'm going to pay attention to those ancient practices. And the ones I just spoke about, what am I doing? I'm paying attention that I need to create, if I am going to walk with kids, I have to create a wide space. It's just not my kid, it's your kid. It's your boys. It's your daughter. It's your granddaughter. And so we become aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters to all of this community of people. I think about the influence when, Kirsten went to the hard time. She would go. she'd go to Kevin and Karen. What do you think? And she got prayer from your sister. Why? Because part of the family. So you create a wide space. And then what you have to do is you have to experience it yourself. You got to make it personal yourself. So this is not just this is my relationship with God. So I've got to live it before I give it. Then you create a rhythm. You normalize conversations about God in your life with your kids. So here's what I want to do. He says, don't forget. We're going to remember Jesus right now. And what I had to do with the message is I wanted to create some space for Jesus to do some things in our life. And so I'm going to invite the ushers to come and to pass out communion right now. We're going to remember Jesus. And I had to put a comma in the message, so we'll get like part 2 next week. But I want to leave a couple spoilers for next week. So if you don't like spoilers, go like this. But I'm going to drop these seeds, and this is where I'm going to head it next week, and I'll take off from there. 2 things I want you to remember. So ushers, you can go ahead and pass out communion if you would. The first thing is this. I used to think, what's the goal of parenting? This is what I thought. And I had a lot of conversations with other parents. They think the same thing. Ready? What's the goal of parenting? The goal of parenting is to make sure that you grow and raise independent children, right? They're the kids that they stand on their own 2 feet. Basically, they're independent. Like, hey, listen, they're self-sufficient. What happened? I did the college. I got the job. I got the career. I got the wife. I got the kids. I got the house. I got the car. They got the dogs, whatever. I got it. I'm independent. And here's what I came to find out. The goal is not to raise an independent child. The goal is to raise a God-dependent adult. So what do you mean by that? When you think about it, are there any truly independent adults? We as adults, whether we want to admit it or not, I don't care how independent you are, you're not totally independent. You're dependent. So the question is, who or what are you dependent on? So I just dropped that in. The goal is not to raise an independent child, it is to raise a God-dependent adult. What's a God-dependent adult? I believe that a God-dependent adult is someone who says, God, you control meaning and purpose in my life. You control that. Now, what's kind of crazy is like when we're raising our kids, we kind of control that, right? We like to control that, like, I'm the one. No, you're not the one. And so when we send them off to college, we think, we're sending them off to be independent. Are you kidding me? Sending them off to what? Because they're going to be dependent. What are they going to be dependent on? The voices that they hear, the choices that they make. So get rid of the myth of independence. God-dependent adult is God our Father controls meaning and purpose for us. So that's number 1. I'm going to go into it next week. All right, were you okay with that? I got another little trailer for next week. Second one of the things we really wrestle with as parents, I don't know, I totally wrestled with this. Maybe you don't, which is great. We wrestle with the stress of perfection. I need to raise a perfect kid. And my kid's a church kid. She's a pastor's daughter. She had PK, right? So she lives in a fishbowl. Everybody looks at her, oh no, what's she wearing, what's she saying? So, oh no, I got to raise a perfect child, which means I need to be a perfect parent. I found out really quickly that ain't happening, and that didn't happen. I mean, listen, I made many, many mistakes with our beautiful daughter, especially that first boyfriend. Oh, dear. I've had to repent over that one. I made so many mistakes. I could write a book. How not? That first boyfriend. Poor Eli. And so what happens is we get wrapped up in that perfection thing, don't we? I feel like I have to be the perfect parent, and if I'm not the perfect parent, I'm not going to have a perfect kid. And nobody has perfect kids. So I just want to say the goal of parenting is not perfection. The goal of parenting is to point your child to a father who is. Kabish? The goal of parenting is not perfection. Is to point them to a Father who is. Because they're going to see that. They're going to see the imperfection in us anyway. But there's something else about that. What's the value of that? This Father who is a Father who was and is and shall ever be. That Father. Because I'll tell you, I can be there for Kirsten, but there's going to be a time in her life I'm not there. I won't be here. What then? What then when she faces the challenges that we all face? We did the fire, right? What we were saying about. What happens when Kirsten faces the fire? We're all going to face the fire. What does she do? I want to point her to a Father who says, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not anxiously look about, for I am your God, and I will help you. Surely I will uphold you with my righteous right arm. Don't fear. I'm with you. Do you understand how critical that is? So I'm going to unpack that next week. So that gives you a reason to come back maybe next week. So in your hands, you have the elements of communion. And I want to speak to something right now before we take communion, because this is incredibly important. When we say, I want for them to be a God-dependent adult, that changes everything, because it's God that defines the relationship. And what does that look like? For some of you here, you say, Nicholas, thank you for the message. I feel like totally like I blew it. I mean, what? I didn't raise my kids like that at all. Now they're adults. They don't have God in their life, because I didn't have God in my life. So I feel like I've really failed. And I just want to say something to you. It is never too late for God to write stories in your kids' lives, even as an adult. As they see the change in you, as they see something happening in you, you can share that God story. You can pray for them and allow them to see something. God is not done with your children, even though you may have started out not having a God story at all. Does that make sense? The other thing that happens is that when it comes to being this adult that is God-dependent, boy, does God give us a bunch of things that we can learn and take with us into life. One of them is just forgiveness. The power of forgiveness. He teaches us how to love. He teaches us how to treat other people. You know, it's interesting. I was in a conversation with a guy yesterday at a party, and he was just talking about, I said, boy, sometimes loving and forgiving is really challenging. He's a devout Catholic. And I said, yeah, but that's at the heart of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And we're going to celebrate right now. Right now, we're going to celebrate what Jesus did when he gathered on that Passover night. And it says, on the night of his betrayal, he took bread. It wasn't like a night of celebration. A night of betrayal, he took bread and he broke it and he said, this is my body which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. So that he says, listen, when you have the broken place in your life, do this in remembrance of me, because I know your brokenness. I went through brokenness so that you could be healed. And then he takes the cup of the new covenant in his blood, and he says, this is for the forgiveness of sins. Do this in remembrance of me. So as we celebrate communion, would you bring yourself to the table with Jesus? And would you say, Jesus, I'm all in. I'm all in. And maybe you've never said that before. Maybe this is a great time to do this. Say, Jesus, as I receive these elements, they represent you. And from this moment on, the best way that I know how, I'm going to give my life to you. I'm going to follow you. Thank you for dying on the cross to forgive me my sin. But beyond that, giving me freedom to live a new life. And here's what I'd like for you to do. Think about the child right now. Think about the children right now. The ones that are on your heart. Would you bring them to Jesus as we celebrate communion? Say, God, I know that you want them, you want me to flourish in an anxious world. So right now, I say, Jesus, like we said, you are my one thing. You. My relationship with you, and then my relationship and how I treat other people. Bring those children to Jesus. Who are they? Who's on your heart right now that you're carrying? And it could be your biological children. It could be your stepchildren. It could be your aunt. It could be your niece. It could be your nephew. Who is that person that you want to bring to Jesus today? Say, Jesus, I give my life to you, and I entrust them to you. That I would not live with a spirit of fear, but power and love and a sound mind, knowing that, God, you want me to flourish in an anxious world. So let's take the bread right now. Said on that Passover night, he took the bread, would have been matzah like this, pierced, striped, and he broke it. And after giving thanks, and we thank you, God. We thank you, Jesus, for living this life that you did, to giving us forgiveness and freedom. We remember your death. Never going to forget what you did for us. So let's partake together. Thank you for strength, that you're going to make a way where there seems to be no way. When we pass through the fire, God, you're going to be with us. The floods will come in, but they're not going to overwhelm us because you're with us and you're for us. Then he took the cup, and the cup of the new covenant, forgiveness of sins. Just thank him for forgiveness right now. Thank him for forgiveness. And then would you begin to have him give you the power to forgive those who have sinned against you? Would you ask him for that? He said, take this cup, drink it, remembering me. Let's remember Jesus. For as much as you eat this bread and you drink this cup, you remember the Lord's death until he comes. We don't forget. We're not going to forget you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord. Let's stand as the worship team closes us out.